A wonderful character study, incredible dialogue, so many things to enjoy about the film. So we're going to take some time, talk with our Film Week critics, talk with our very special guest. As I mentioned at the beginning, we have a number of excerpts of an interview that I conducted with Robert Forster just last week. The entire interview is going to air on Film Week this coming Friday, but you're going to get to hear the excerpts before anyone else and to see him from the video interview as well. So first, let me introduce our Film Week critics who are going to be part of our conversation this evening. First, joining us, Tim Cogshell. Tim? Next, another one of our critics who has been with us on the show for years, also a very good personal friend of Tim's, who recommended Tim to me, and I'm so glad that Tim has now been a part of the show for years. His good buddy and our good friend, Wade Major. And finally, the man whose work we've just seen for the past 2.5 hours, writer, director, and yes, he's also an actor, Quentin Tarantino.
Thanks a lot, everybody. You guys were a great audience to watch the movie with.
So, Quentin, I'm so appreciative of you being here for this tonight. What is it like for you watching this 20 years after making the film, and with your fiance here who's not seen it all the way through?
Yeah. Daniela hadn't seen it all the way through. I think she tried to watch a DVD of it in Israel, and then it froze or something, and she hasn't gotten around to seeing it again. I go, well, you know, seeing it with 1,500 people at the United Artists Theater would be cool. I see my movies a lot. I like my movies, so I watch them from time to time. And whenever I see it, like you go through the cable guide, and whenever I see one of my movies, I always try to watch it.
Really? That's great.
Wherever it's on at a certain period of time. But frankly, to tell you the truth, I think it is the first time I've seen it this year. All right, since like the 20th anniversary, and when I heard you guys were doing this, I thought, oh, well, that'd be cool, because this theater is a really nice theater. I thought it would be a really cool thing to watch it in this historic old Broadway theater. And then also, but a weird symmetry as far as the 20-year mark is a couple of guests that I'm here with is Peter Bogdanovich.
Peter, if you don't mind, would you stand up so we can honor you, the great filmmaker Peter Bogdanovich?
And his wife, LB, and the thing is, they were actually, they were actually with me at the premiere 20 years ago. So they were actually sitting next to me at the premiere. So it's kind of interesting to sit here. Yeah. But also there was actually even kind of a link, I think, between Jackie Brown and one of Peter's films, in particularly his film, They All Laughed. And the way they used New York, and the way it's a lot of people walking around New York, and very natural.
And a great cast, Ben Gazzara.
Yeah, fantastic cast.
Audrey Hepburn.
Very natural lighting. There's nothing movie-ish about it, all right? But you really feel New York, and you have the sense of the characters moving through New York in that world, and that was the world I was trying to evoke in, like, the South Bay for Los Angeles.
Yeah. At what point did you determine, when you were going to adapt Rum Punch, the Elmore Leonard novel, that Pam Grier would be a great Jackie?
Wow, God, it was interesting. It just started with a little question that I asked myself, you know. I got through, in the book, her name is Jackie Burke, and she's white. And I guess the book would suggest like a Michelle Pfeiffer or a Annette Bening or somebody like that. And so I'm reading the book, and when I finished the book, I was like, well, you know, she should be, you know, in her mid-50s. She should still be really beautiful. You could tell she was beautiful, and she still is beautiful. but you really have to feel that she can handle anything, that she wouldn't be scared put up against these opposing forces. And you got to feel that she could handle anything. And I was like, wow, that sounds like a Pam Grier movie. And so I thought of Pam Grier, and I always liked her. I thought she would do good in the film. And then the idea of turning the story of Rum Punch and turning it into a de facto Pam Grier movie. All right, but it's the deconstructed Pam Grier movie, a real Pam Grier movie, a real, she's not coffee blowing off pushers' heads with sawed-off shotguns. She's a woman who works for a shuttle flight service, and she had a trouble in the past. So it was like trying to take a Pam Grier movie, kind of redeem it from the pornography always involved in it, and actually make it a real story.
Let's hear Robert Forster, as I mentioned, who recorded with me last week at KPCC in our Crawford Family Forum. I began our conversation by asking him what was in his mind during the final scene that we just saw with Jackie Brown.
Almost the whole movie was well scripted. The last scene, Quentin said to me, look, I don't know quite how I'm going to finish this movie. I don't know what the ending is going to be quite yet. But what happens between the two of you will influence that. And at a certain moment, he said, close to the end of the scene, he said, the phone is going to ring. Pick it up. And we were doing the scene. The phone rang. I picked up the phone and improvised a little conversation between me and whoever was at the other end. A mother. I asked her, is there a father in the house? And da-da-da-da. During which time Pam realizes I am wedded to my business. And she probably recognizes exactly what I have to do, which is stick to my business, which is helping or being there for or influencing. And she realized, and she leaves. She gets into her car, and as you know, I follow her out the door and out the road, and there she goes.
I asked him about how Quentin approached him about doing the film.
I was sitting there with Frank, this actor I mentioned before, Frank Pesch, and and Quentin walked in. I hadn't seen him there before, but I knew that I had auditioned for him for Reservoir Dogs. And I yelled over at him, and he saw me. He came in. He came out on the patio. He sat with us for a while. During the conversation, I said, "What are you up to?" He says, I'm doing an adaptation of Rum Punch." He said, "Why don't you read it?" I did. 6 months later, I walked into, it was like a March morning, April, whatever it was. It was cold and wet. And I walked out onto the patio, and there was Quentin sitting in my spot. And before I even reached the table, he held up a script and he handed it to me. He said, "See if you like it." That was it.
Wow.
Wow.
And you were concerned that even though he wanted you, that he might not be able to get you, that they would want someone who at that time was at the top of the profession.
Oh, you bet. During that period, I never went for a job that somebody bigger didn't manage to take it, accept it. And so after I'd read it and found out for sure that it was the detective and not some smaller part, because I wasn't really sure that, why would he be giving me this good a role? How could he do that? And I said, oh, man. And I saw him, and I talked to him after I read it, and I said, and he came over to the Silver Spoon, and we had breakfast, and I said, look, I think that you're not going to be able to get me for this. I've had this experience before. The distributors will want somebody bigger. And he said, I hire anybody I want. I didn't realize he had gotten that strong, but he had Pulp Fiction out and Reservoir Dogs, and he had Harvey Weinstein going for him, so he could do whatever he wanted. What a surprise that was!
So did that at that moment just hit you like, this is really going to happen?
A ton of bricks. You stand there, mouth open, thinking, could this happen? I had only one long shot strategy, and that is that some kid who liked me growing up would turn into a movie maker and give me a good part, and that's what happened.
Quentin, what led you to choose him aside from walking into the same coffee shop?
Well, I'd always been a big Robert Forster fan, but from his movies, from his TV show Banyan, which I always thought was really cool. And he was one of those actors that when things didn't work well for him, and then all of a sudden he started doing exploitation movies and stuff, I always find that very interesting because there's some actors that when that starts happening, you know, they're still just as good as they ever were. They're just as serious with their characters as they ever were. To me, that makes me like them even more, all right? You know, because I went and saw every exploitation movie that came out. And so if you see something with Robert Forster, you might like this one, you might not like that one, but I always liked Bob Forster in it. He was always really good. And, you know, and there's a certain light in their eyes that an actor gets when he's been used to working with a lot of substandard material and he gets a chance to actually just eat a really good steak. And like you see it in Martin Landau's performance in Tucker after doing all these Fred Olen Ray movies and everything, and all of a sudden you see him actually really playing a character and gets to say really good lines and gets to be in real scenes with really dynamic actors. And there's just a certain light that, you know, it's not there for Dustin Hoffman because he's had his choice of roles for the last 30 years. But with Robert Forster, there really is something there as far as that's concerned. And I wanted that light, and it was the kind of role that it would work. And when I was, but also there's two other things. One is he's played another character that's very, very similar to Max Cherry. And that was one of the things that was in my mind as I was adapting Rum Punch. Well, and it's funny to say this movie, but Robert Forster is the star of a movie called Alligator, about a giant alligator, and it's a really, really good movie.
And that got him his Tarantino film.
Yeah. It's a Jaws ripoff, but it's a very, very good one. It's, directed by Louis Teague, but it's written by John Sayles, and it's a really well done script. And his character is particularly good. It's one of Sayles' best characters, if you ask me. And to me, Max Cherry could be that guy. I mean, he literally, Robert Forster could be the same exact character he was in Alligator. And he's a cop, and then after the alligator thing happens, he quits the force and opens up a bail bonds office. I mean, to me, he literally could be that guy. You could show Alligator and Jackie Brown, and the Jackie Brown could be the sequel to Alligator.
I love it. Hey, Tim, so Tim...
You've seen it, right?
You know, I was an extra in the sequel to Alligator.
Oh, in the sequel to Alligator,
I
the
was.
Brendan Chase one. Yeah.
Hey, so Tim, your thoughts about Jackie Brown? Because I know you love this film too.
Exquisite, particularly because, you know, a lot of Elmore Leonard, a lot of them, right? A lot of them miss. They're very particular about hewing to those storylines, but they miss because they don't get the characters right. You are not very particular about hewing to that storyline. There's a whole bunch of different stuff in this movie. Jackie was a white lady. In the book, Jackie and Max consummate that relationship. Easier stuff.
And there's all the white supremacy Nazi that's like we just get rid of all that. Yeah.
You skip all of that, yet you still make it an Elmore Leonard adaptation. Talk a little bit about that. How you keep it.
Well, you know, the thing that was always annoying, if you're an Elmore Leonard fan, the thing that was always annoying about Elmore Leonard adaptations is the plots actually were usually pretty good because he would take a genre plot and then have real life come in and mess it up. All right, and that was always really neat. But the greatest hits, the things that you remember, were the Shaggy Dog conversations. The long, rambly pieces of just conversations of really good dialogue. And what they would do when they would do movie versions is they would keep the plots and they would keep all the movie stuff, but then they cleaned up the conversations or just wouldn't let them be rambly and just kind of made them more like normal movie scenes. And, you know, Elmore Leonard's characters, they get around to what they're talking about. They talk around what they're talking about and end up revealing a ton of stuff and making little pop cultural references that end up telling you about them that actually just sounds real and it's crazy funny, but you need the length of those scenes for it to work. So that was pretty much kind of where I was coming from, was I wanted to, as long as you could more or less keep the money exchange aspect of it straight, which is kind of hard to keep straight the first time around, but as long as you can more or less not be completely bewildered about that, what I was really about was about these 4 characters revealing themselves.
Yeah, and allowing those scenes to really go. And so you feel emotionally invested in everyone in the film to some degree or another.
Well, to me, it's it fits into a few different genres, but one of the genres I think it probably fits, the most comfortably in is the hangout movie. A movie like Dazed and Confused, a movie like They All Laughed, a movie where it's more about hanging out with the characters than it is the plot that's moving along. Now, the first time you watch the movie, yeah, you're going to really be following the plot. But my hope was that, you've seen the movie once, and then maybe you like it enough that, 3 years from now or 5 years from now or every 5 years, all right, you put it on and you watch it. And whenever you do, you're smoking cigarettes with Jackie, you're drinking screwdrivers with Ordell, and you're having bong hits with Melanie and Lewis, and driving a Cutlass with Max, all right, but it's like they're your friends.
Yeah.
And when you watch the movie, you're hanging out with your friends.
Wade, what do you want to bring up about the film that particularly strikes you?
I'm never huge on Elmore Leonard. Certainly, I read some, but Elmore Leonard was not my entree into this film. My entree was that I was baptized in all the same genre films that Quentin was in the 60s and 70s. The kung fu films and the Japanese exploitation films, and certainly the blaxploitation films. And I loved Pam Grier movies when I was a kid, because they were unlike anything else. They were. It went there, and the Hollywood studio films didn't go there. And when you're a kid, when you're a pubescent boy, you look at a Pam Grier movie, and that's a door to a world that is completely new and unbelievably cool.
That's the green door, baby.
And like Max Cherry, frightening just a little.
Just a little bit. And so for me, and I Across 110th Street as well, one of my all-time favorite films. Love that film. So when
great
this movie
score by
starts,
Bobby Womack. Yeah.
When this movie starts with that song, I'm in. And as soon as the title comes up with the copyright line, just like all those old movies in the 70s, I'm sold. So I've been brought into this world that I have been missing for 20 years. And like Quentin just said, he redeemed it from the sort of pornographic, low-budget trappings that they were sort of sentenced to of necessity in the 70s. It was sort of what Raiders did for the serial. It legitimized it. It brought it into a whole new experience, and that's what he did with this.
Hey, just a little piece of trivia about Bobby Womack across 110th Street.
Yeah.
He told me, because he was going, I think, out on this tour with the Stones, he told me he holed up and did the whole score in less than a week.
It's amazing.
Just, like staying up 22 hours a day just writing the score.
And see, that's also the great thing. This movie has such an amazing soundtrack. The songs, everything. Quentin's always been really great with that.
Yes.
And, that's, right? That's the thing. That's one of the things that you remember as well. Tim and I were talking about this before the movie. All the movies of the blaxploitation era have these amazing soundtracks.
Superfly.
James Brown hadn't done a soundtrack until he did Black Caesar. It's just on and on and on. Marvin Gaye. It's just these amazing soundtracks from people that nobody would have thought to give them a chance to do a soundtrack for a movie.
Bob Forster told me, Quentin, that in the scenes, I'm not sure whether it was all of them, but scenes that he's doing with Jackie, that you played music. He wasn't sure if it was actually from your soundtrack, but evocative music.
Oh yeah, well, I definitely played Natural High, all right, on the day, just on a boombox, all right, when Jackie came walking out, so he could this is going to be playing when you see her, and then, so I did play that there, just so we could time that out. One of the things that was actually interesting in the film, though, is I had my songs, and up until this movie, in both Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, I never used movie music, and I just had songs, and I hadn't planned on changing it on this one. But then both my late editor Sally Menke and Harvey Weinstein were saying, yeah, I think it needs a little bit more music. And then Harvey said, is there just some soundtrack that you like that we could just buy the rights and just just cut the music in? And I thought about it and go, wow, I mean, if we're going to do that, we should do it with the Coffee soundtrack. All right, because the movie, my favorite movie of hers, one of my favorite exploitation movies of all time, is a movie called Coffee, and Roy Ayers did the soundtrack. And I had the album, and a lot of people didn't have the album. I had the album. And I liked that idea of actually using the Coffee soundtrack as opposed to going to, I don't know, Danny Elfman or somebody and saying, hey, can you give me a Roy Ayers or a blaxploitation-like feel? No, I'm using the actual soundtrack to a blaxploitation movie. And so we just took the cuts from the album and just cut it into the movie for our movie music.
Yeah, it's true. A great vibraphonist and writer, Roy, who's still performing. I saw him Playboy Jazz Festival this year at the Bowl. Yeah, in a Vibe Summit, and he was great. This film, how do you fit it into your body of work? What place does it have, kind of in your emotions, in the course of all the films you've done?
It's a very emotional movie. I mean, to me, it stands out apart from the rest of them for the simple fact that as much writing as I did, I mean, if you've read the book, there's a lot of original stuff in here. Almost the whole Beaumont thing is all me. I mean, it's in there, but it's not dramatized the way it is in the piece. There's a lot of original writing in here. Nevertheless, it still is absolutely a collaboration between me and Elmore Leonard, and it's a novel adaptation. So to me, it does stand apart from the rest of them that are all that I came up with completely on my own, as far as like looking at a blank piece of paper, and that's cool. I think that actually is a neat place for it to sit. And I had some different concerns back then. After I had such a success with Pulp Fiction, where it's like, if Pulp Fiction had sort of kind of worked, then I probably would have done more movies like Pulp Fiction to try to just keep getting that voice out there. But then when your voice got just completely accepted at you doing what you want to do at the heightest, well, I had nowhere else to go.
How do you top that?
Well, it wasn't even so much how do I top that. I had nothing else to say then, all right? I'd said it, and you heard it, and you got it. So it's not like more of a knotty problem that maybe you'll understand it a little bit more here and a little bit more there. So this was the movie where I had to figure out, what am I going to do now for the rest of my career? I'd almost outgrown the material that had made me famous, and now I had to figure out what I wanted to do next.
Am I mistaken? Is this still your only adaptation?
Yeah, it's my only adaptation. And the thing is, I'd always really liked Elmore Leonard's stuff, and back before I'd ever made a movie, I thought that I would write a film and then do an Elmore Leonard adaptation, and then write a film and then do another Elmore Leonard adaptation. And I kind of got it out of my system when I did Jackie Brown. But Jackie Brown offered me a chance, all right, to go back to that idea. Here's this piece of material. I see it probably differently than most other people would do it. And then when I kind of found the Pam Grier angle and the doing a glancing off a blaxploitation angle, that kind of gave me like the hook that I could bring to it that I thought would be cool and would be fun. But then I also really liked the idea of dealing with these older characters, being a young director, a young man. It's interesting watching this movie now where I'm the age of the characters. All right, but I was a young man dealing with characters who were aging. I mean, that final kiss, the characters are about 120 years, got 120 years between them, and that was also kind of cool. You don't see movies like that. And
the locations, I said before, such a huge part. Who put Sam's Hofbrau in a?
That's a great strip club.
the notorious Sam's Hofbrau.
Yeah, the notorious Sam's Hofbrau.
We're going to take questions. If you come right down here to the right side of the stage, Liz has a microphone. If you have question for Quentin or for Wade or for Tim, please come on down and make it as concise as you could, please, because we want to get as many audience questions as we can. Just, all right, we'll try and move as fast as we can. Sir, rapid fire, your question.
Quentin, what was it like to work with Samuel L. Jackson?
Oh, it's always fun to work with him. He really understood this character a lot, and he's the one that kind of came up with the look, the long hair, the almost kind of samurai kind of hairstyle that he had, and the little goatee. That was all Sam.
All right. All right. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I wanted to know about the use of the Little Kim song. It seemed like the only song that was like contemporary at the time, and it was really
When he's in the
It's
record
actually
store,
Foxy
yeah.
Brown. not Little
Foxy
Kim,
Brown.
Foxy Brown. Well, he's, because he's buying the Delphonics cassette in a record store, so they could be playing modern music at that time. And the idea that there was a rap star that used Pam Grier's name, Foxy Brown, all right, how can you not?
And what's sampled, of course, is of the earlier era, too. So it's both current and a throwback. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you're obviously very well known for lots and lots of great dialogue, but you also talk about the kind of Shaggy Dog hanging out dialogue of the Elmore Leonard material. Can you talk about a little bit about what you brought to the dialogue from the novel and how close it is, or how much is all you now?
I use a whole lot of his dialogue, but part of the thing wasn't to just take the book pages and copy his dialogue. The idea was to collaborate. I mean, my dialogue, to some degree, I kind of learned a bit of my rhythms of writing dialogue from Elmore Leonard to some degree. So the idea was to, us to trade back and forth, to actually literally collaborate with him, i.e. take the scenes and go off on my own, but then come back to him, and to keep that Shaggy Dog kind of feeling. But like I said, the idea was to be a collaboration between my dialogue and his.
Yes, sir.
I love how perfect the casting is in this film. Were all the actors your first choices?
Yeah, they all ended up being my first choices. One thing I was going to say about the Robert Forster thing, though, was when I was writing it, I was thinking in my mind that, I thought 4 actors could be really good as Max Cherry. Gene Hackman, I thought back then could have been good. Paul Newman, back then, could have been good. John Saxon, back then, could have been good. And Robert Forster. And Robert Forster just seemed to me the most authentic. I.e., if you walk into that bail bonds office in Carson, you would see a guy like Robert Forster sitting behind the desk.
Yeah. Yeah, no suspension of disbelief required.
No, I mean, it's like that would be who you would see sitting behind the desk, not Paul Newman. And then I just walked into Silver Spoons, the breakfast place he was talking about, and I just decided to consider it as a fate. And so I gave him the role then. So
you made the decision in that moment?
More or less, all right. But I knew I was going to have to give him the role, or else I'm going to be bombarded by bigger actors. And then if I can tell everybody, look, I've already cast him, and I can't go back on my word, well, then that protects me a little bit.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Quentin. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous because I can't believe that I'm talking to an Oscar-winning filmmaker. As a director, after casting the actors, how do you pay the actors, or who pays the actors for being in the film?
Who pays the actors for being in the movie?
Yeah, how do
there's the budget. They get a check. They get a check at the end of the week.
Yes, ma'am.
If you had to pick one word or phrase to describe as best you can the soul of your entire body of work, what would you pick and why?
Oh, that's a heavy lifting question.
Just one.
One word or phrase. Groovy.
There's the poll quote.
I'm going to answer that question for him. The answer is authentic.
Oh, that's a nice thing.
There are Quentin Tarantino films, and you can say that, and everybody knows what you're talking about.
Oh, thank you much,
yes.
mate. Thank you.
Being myself a young connoisseur of film, I'm thinking about making a film of my own. Do you have any advice for a young filmmaker?
Yes, do it. All right, go out and make the film, and work your butt off on it. And then, but if when you're done you don't like it, don't give up. Yeah, and that might just be your first attempt at it. And learn what you did right, figure out what you did wrong, and then make another one, and make another one until you're happy with them.
What do you think of film school? Do you recommend it? You didn't go that route. Do you recommend it?
No, I wouldn't recommend film school at all anymore. I mean, the only reason I would recommend film school before was because they gave you 16 millimeter cameras and film. But in a world where you can just buy a cell phone and make a movie, why are you going to school?
All right. Right, yes, sir.
So, as a photographer, I have my own reasons, but what are your reasons as a filmmaker for keeping on film stock in like a digital age?
I could go on and on and on about that, but it's my art form. It's it's like asking why does an oil painter, why doesn't he not use crayons? All right, that's my art form. That's what I like. I mean, just showing up to shoot a video, that's not even worth getting out of bed for, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, if people make movies on digital, I go, wow, I guess you don't care enough about your movie to make it on film. That's my feeling.
Hey, I am so sorry. I am so sorry that we have to wrap. I'm sorry I can't take any more questions. My apologies.
The last two, the Homer Simpson and the woman with the pen.
I've got a house. If we can do it in 30 seconds, okay.
In the beginning of your career, you used a lot of Harvey Keitel. How come you don't use him later in your films?
No reason. Now, actually, his voice is in *Inglourious Bastards*. He plays a voice cameo, but only because I haven't had any roles that would be necessarily right for Harvey. But I love Harvey. He's like my godfather.
Okay, one more, and we have to close the house.
Great,
Go right ahead.
sure.
Okay, thank you. I've been waiting 20 years to talk to you. I saw this movie in the theater 20 years ago, and it did change my life. I've never seen a movie with a black female lead that was reflective of my mother, reflective of my grandmother, reflective of my aunt, reflective of my community. I'm here from Los Angeles, reflective of the South Bay, the Cockatoo Inn, all those places. The authenticity of what you offered has been so inspiring. This is my Jackie Brown poster. I'm going to beg you to please sign it for me. My question is, what have you, I mean, you're one of the very few filmmakers who has consistently and very realistically dealt with the issue of race and dealt with the issue of racism and the way people really talk about it behind closed doors, and I thank you for that from the bottom of my heart. My question to you about that is, how have you felt about the backlash you've received from people who feel that you're dealing with taboo all the time?
Oh, one, thank you for everything you just said. I appreciate it. It's a drag. Being misunderstood is never fun for anybody under any circumstance, all right? Being misunderstood and being misunderstood in this racial kind of way from people popping off to you online is, it's not fun. But what am I going to do? I mean, the thing is, I'm an artist. I got to do my thing, and the right people know, and the wrong people, well, they don't know. F them. I don't care, and. But you just always have to just remind yourself, the work is not about today. You're thinking about today, but it's not about today. It's about 20 years from now, and 30 years from now, and 40 years from now. And some of the critics that can't stand you right now, their kids could end up loving you.
Hey, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Quentin Tarantino, Tim Cogshell, Wade Major.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was great. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
I'm so sorry we didn't have time for more questions. Thank you for
Thanks,
coming
everybody.
out and supporting the film. We look forward to your tuning in for Film Week every Friday at 11 and Saturday at noon on KPCC. And I hope you'll come back and join us for our next Film Week screening series. Drive safely. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you for all your support of KPCC. Thank you.